Late summer has historically been a pretty slow month for the video game industry, and that holds true now in 2023. We've got a lot of heavy hitters coming soon. Starfield, Spider-Man 2, and my personal most hyped release of the year, Baldur's Gate 3. But at present, we're sort of in the calm before the storm. For most of this summer, I have been plagued with the question of, what do I play? With Starfield around the corner, I thought about hopping into yet another playthrough of Skyrim, but I didn't want to spend 50 hours modding a playthrough that would inevitably only last around 20. With Baldur's Gate 3 around the corner, I thought about replaying Divinity Original Sin 2, or maybe visiting Baldur's 1 and 2, but I didn't want to burn myself out on a heavy CRPG before the main event got here. I was so conflicted on what to play. Here I was browsing the Steam Summer Sale when something caught my eye. A newly released title fresh out of early access, and 10% off of its $20 price tag to boot. I figured, why not? I went in expecting something small, something quaint. A little game, for lack of a better word, that would only ask 10 to 15 hours out of me before I exhausted the majority of its content. And Dave the Diver certainly presents itself that way. But few games have pleasantly surprised me, enthralled me, and enraptured me as much as Dave the Diver has this summer. I went in expecting a quaint indie title. I came out thinking, holy shit, is this my game of the year? Dave the Diver sees you taking up the mantle of Dave the Diver. The first thing we learn about Dave is that he is a yes man. He's so much of a yes man that he's willing to drop his tropical vacation on a moment's notice to fly out to meet his friend Cobra on urgent business. What is this urgent business, you may ask? Cobra is starting a sushi restaurant and he needs a professional diver to capture the fish that will be fed to the patrons. And we, Dave, fit that bill. From here, we're introduced to the central gameplay loop that Dave the Diver builds itself around. During the day, you'll explore the sea, catch fish, complete quests, and collect crafting and cooking materials. At night, you'll take your spoils, and with the help of the head chef Boncho, help run and manage the sushi restaurant. The profit you generate from the restaurant then can be reinvested into better gear for yourself and to train your restaurant staff. At least, this is the loop at the start. You see, one of the most surprising and delightful parts of Dave the Diver is the way in which it presents a false notion of itself. You know how in Elden Ring the map starts like this, but once you explore it keeps zooming out more and more till it ends like this? Dave the Diver does this same sort of thing multiple times throughout the course of the game, and in ways I could guarantee you'd never see coming. What starts as a simple diving simulator restaurant management hybrid will eventually blossom outward to include a farming sim, seahorse racing, side-scrolling stealth, visual novels, and more. Much like the mysterious blue hole the game is set in, Dave the Diver's gameplay loop is always expanding, shifting, and evolving, adding at best new mechanics and subsystems, and at worst, new gimmicks. Pushing all the extras out of the way though, we see that the foundational piece of Dave the Diver is this simple loop of dive in, catch fish, sell fish at restaurant for profit, repeat. This fundamental core of the game can be both relaxing and tense, engaging and tedious depending on where you are in the story and what objectives you have on your to-do list. And the truth is, as great as the gameplay loop is, the modern gamer is spoiled for choice on great gameplay loops. Video games have been developed for over 50 years at this point, believe it or not, and seasoned vets of the industry are really damn good at creating compelling systems for the audience to engage with. There are plenty of games that have uber-addicting gameplay, but everything else contained within is shit, and it deflates the overall product to something that most likely isn't worth your time. All of this to ask the question, does Dave the Diver have anything else going for it? And to that I would respond with a resounding, confident, fuck yes. The most notable part of Dave the Diver outside of its gameplay are its fantastic cutscenes that have no business being as good as they are. I mean, just watch this. There was more love and care put into this 20-second cutscene than the entirety of Wolfenstein Youngblood. There are dozens of these throughout the game, and they're a true joy to behold. It speaks to how well they're done when I'm sitting through a cutscene I've seen 10 times before just because it's that goddamn good. The music also elevates the presentation to even higher highs. The track you'll be hearing most frequently is titled Diver, which plays during the underwater portions of the game. On the restaurant side, you'll be hearing the track titled Restaurant Prep, which ditches the serene feeling of the nautical tracks for lo-fi hip-hop. The soundtrack of Dave the Diver isn't really dynamic. Each area of the game has a dedicated song that loops over and over until you move on to the next thing. The beauty of Dave the Diver's soundtrack is the way in which it blends into the background, to the point that you never really get tired of it to begin with. In my near 30 hours with the game, I've not once cursed the soundtrack for being repetitive or bland. Dave the Diver utilizes a pixel art style reminiscent of something like Stardew Valley or Terraria, albeit with a bit more clarity here. Where Dave the Diver's graphics get interesting, however, is the way the game portrays a hybrid 2D, 3D space. We as the player are confined to a two-dimensional plane, only able to move up, down, left, and right. However, certain fish, and we'll say other entities, have 3D animations in their arsenal, seemingly moving through the ocean in a way that we, the player, never can. There are a lot of fish in Dave the Diver, like we're talking triple digits. All of these fish can be combined with different ingredients to make certain dishes. A very wise thing Dave the Diver does is allow you to upgrade certain dishes over time, so those early game dishes with the smaller and easier to catch prey don't become totally obsolete as time goes on. Most fish are passive to you and will run from you. However, there are a handful of underwater predators that will attempt to eat you as you approach them, which forces you into combat. Most of these fish have distinct and interesting movement patterns. Take, for instance, the long-nosed saw shark, which has a sort of charge up before it darts straight at you with a blinding speed. Compare this to the megamouth shark, which, as the name would suggest, creates a vacuum with its gargantuan mouth and attempts to suck you towards it. Some fish are pretty easy to fight and don't pose much of a challenge, but seeing something like a marlin come up in the early game filled me with a lot of dread and terror that you'd never expect from looking at Dave the Diver's cover art or reading the game's description on Steam. Part of the reason Dave the Diver is as interesting out of the water as it is in is because of the great characters. Now, I'm not suggesting that the game has Red Dead 2 level characterization, but all of these characters have distinct, if over-the-top, personalities. Most of the characters have a surprisingly complex backstory that's slowly unraveled to you through the course of the game. These NPCs aren't the lifeblood of the game by any means, but they were deeper than I expected and represent a nice, shiny maraschino cherry on top of the entire Dave the Diver sundae. As much as Dave the Diver has going for it, it is certainly not a perfect game. For one, the gameplay loop is initially engaging, but as time wears on, the cracks do begin to show. You'll spend way more time in the ocean than you will in the restaurant. I've had dives as long as 40 minutes, and the little 10-minute section of restaurant management is never enough of a palate cleanser to be truly refreshed once the next diving segment rolls around. There are also quite a few tedious quests in Dave the Diver. Many have you diving to the bottom of the ocean to look for certain things that I won't spoil here, and just getting to the correct depth to begin your search can take a lot of time, energy, and resources. To add insult to injury, by the time you've made it to the depths of the ocean, you're probably close to overweight thanks to all the fish and resources you've been collecting on your descent. By the time you're ready to begin looking for your quest items to progress the story, you'll be moving at a snail's pace, which makes engaging with the quests all the more tedious and frustrating. The combat can also be hit or miss. It can be a bit awkward to maneuver in this 2D open space, and while the enemy attack patterns and animations look cool, some are trivially easy to dodge while others feel unfairly difficult. Earlier, I praised the game for constantly expanding on the gameplay loop, but not everything added is a home run. A few of the mechanics come off as gimmicky, equivalent to a QuickTime event like the welding minigame for when you need to cut into ships to access the goodies inside. The first time you weld, it's cool. The fifth time, it just feels like a waste. Even with these complaints, Dave the Diver hits a lot more than it misses, and I'm not the only one that thinks so. The game has done amazingly well, selling over 1 million copies since its release out of early access. For a PC exclusive that's relying solely on organic marketing, This is majorly impressive. There's a Switch release planned, which is the perfect platform for a game like this, and you've got to think it will come to Xbox and PlayStation at some point. This was exactly what I needed before Baldur's Gate 3. Before hopping into Faerun for what's almost guaranteed to be a 100-hour plus journey, I needed something light, simple, breezy. That's exactly what Dave the Diver was, but it was also so much more. To me, Dave the Diver is the indie of the summer, and if I could leave you with one word of advice, it would be, go play this shit.